Hello and good morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning into another episode of TU Stories. I am your host, Adrian Battle Marston, and I work in the Office of Inclusion and Institutional Equity. And today we have another guest, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ava Askandrian. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the new administrative assistant at the Center for Student Diversity.
Ava, you are newly sort of hired in the CSD, right?
Kind of, sort of.
More like full time. This is like a new territory. Does it feel any different?
In a lot of ways, yes. In a lot of ways, no.
Yeah.
Like, okay, the backstory. So I was a student employee since like 2021, and now I graduated, and now I'm a full-time staff member at the Center for Student Diversity. So I used to have a few responsibilities when I was still a student worker, but now I have the full-on experience of kind of helping to run the center, the suite, and kind of keep the flow going in the most organized way possible. So it's been a learning curve, but
Yeah.
It's been a good one though. It's been a good learning curve.
So you were a student first.
Yes.
Was Towson your first choice, or were there other choices?
When I was a student,
Yeah.
oh, this is a really interesting story. So when I was in high school, I did not really get good grades. I was not a very like high achieving academic wise kind of student.
Mhm.
But so I was always very, like my junior and senior year of high school, I was very anxious about if I was gonna get into college at all. Because I was like, my grades are not and they weren't like bad grades, but it was just kind of mediocre, you
Yeah.
know. So I started with dual enrollment my senior year of high school so I could take college credits early at my local community college. And that's kind of how Towson just became more, it was just the clearest pathway for me. It has the program that I wanted for my undergraduate. I majored in psychology, so
Mm.
their program looked very well-rounded. I got to like experience different sections and avenues of psychology through that, whether it was like research or writing papers, like research papers, and
Yeah.
having like more hands-on experience. But another huge factor in what inspired me to go to Towson was that my mom had also graduated from Towson a few years before I went to Towson. So
Oh,
2017, she
really?
graduated with her bachelor's degree. To her, she really enjoyed, she also got her degree in psychology.
You ended up working as a student worker in the CSD, and now you're sort of working here full time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I've got to ask, because a lot of times when it comes to anything related to like diversity work, I have learned that there is always like a story behind it,
Yeah.
right? Because this is one of the more personable, people facing, people serving jobs that you can find anywhere, not just in higher ed. And a lot of it is more like we're trying to create like transformational change for some
Mm-hmm.
group of people. What drew you into the CSD?
There were a lot of different factors that drew me into the CSD. The first factor and the most important, I think, in my story is that so I was a refugee when I was I think like 5 or 6, I left the country that I was born in, Iran. And we kind of resided in Turkey for a bit. We were religious minorities of the Baha'i faith, so we weren't given that many rights in Iran, and there was a lot of prejudice. So we left our home and everything that we knew, and my parents at the time were fairly young. They were the age that I am now. So like
Oh,
having
wow.
a child, packing up your entire life, leaving everything behind, not really knowing the language or anything. They didn't really know English, they didn't really know Turkish. So packing up everything and like to the best of their ability, being able to reside in Turkey for a few months and then getting everything figured out so that they could move to the United States. That kind of played a huge factor in my understanding of, okay, going into America and seeing, wow, there are so many different cultures and so many different people here, so that was a huge factor of what kind of drew me into the Center for Student Diversity. Because you don't often, or up until like recently, you don't really hear like refugee stories that look different. Like in media, you see refugees as one type of thing,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what you're presented, but that's not necessarily the case.
Mm.
So that was kind of a huge thing that pulled me into the Center for Student Diversity, was my background and like growing up here, understanding the American culture and then trying to preserve my Iranian culture. And
Mm.
um, that was a huge thing that brought me in. Another factor that pulled me into the Center for Student Diversity was just like from my first interaction with the space and the people from the center, like my interview for when I was a student employee to get the job, I just saw friendly faces, like an accepting mentality of like, yeah, we have a space for you, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll accept you. So that was it gave me like an excitement, like, oh my God, like, wow, I just like transferred over to this school. And then this was right after the pandemic. This was right after we all
Mm-hmm.
came back from the lockdown and everything. So this was 2021 when I
Mm.
applied for this job and interviewed for this job. And I was really looking for any type of way to be involved. And I think by applying to the student employee position, I accidentally like stepped into this whole world of ways that I could be more involved on campus and to help others feel safe and feel seen. Um, and then the reason that I came back and applied for like the full-time position, was, like I said, when I was a student employee, I just felt like this was such a safe space, and I made some very close friends in this space. And it just always, when I stepped in this space, it felt like home to me, kind of like my
Yeah.
home on campus, because I was a commuter. So I would just like step in to like do my homework and have my food and talk to my friends. So this was kind of like my home on campus, away from my home.
Mm.
So and this was all thanks to like my mentors who worked in the space. And yeah, it was.
That's such a fascinating story, and you point out a couple of things that I wanted to see if we could sort of dive into that, particularly where you sort of mentioned now you've got sort of these two cultures sort of
Mhm,
existing at the same time.
mhm.
What was that like for you observing your parents?
Oh, um, I I think personally, with the immigration and refugee experience, I was privileged um, in comparison to my parents,
Mm.
because I came here as this wee little like this kid, and kids they assimilate
Yeah.
easier. But when you're like in your mid-20s and you know you leave everything behind, um, it's difficult. And I think what my parents felt was this weird sort of um, isolation in
Mm.
a way, because finding your new community here that far on in your life is kind of difficult. And especially finding a new community in a place where you don't speak the language and you don't necessarily understand the culture yet.
Yeah.
It took them a little while to find their footing. What I really appreciate about my parents was that even though they came to this country with very little understanding of the language and what was going on around, um, they got up and running pretty quick. Like I said, my mom, while she was raising me, um, working her job, she was going to school full time as well. So yeah, I kind of got to saw that perseverance in her, and my dad as well. My dad also went to school here. They both decided to continue their education in however way
Mm.
they could. Um, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so now, fast forwarding here, I mean, I'm just trying to think about mid to late 20s,
Hmm.
trying to move to a different country without knowing the language. I'm like, I feel, I feel like our parents are just built different because I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could probably survive that.
Yeah.
And go ahead. You sound like you're going to time it.
Oh, sorry. And that's like the very, I'm giving like the very bare minimum of what was going on. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
it was a lot more nitty gritty than that. Like, they tell me stories of like the whole immigration and refugee experience that I literally just sit there in silence and I'm like, what happened? And the thing is, like,
Wow.
they were like, wow, we thought you knew. And I was like, no, I didn't know that happened. They were like, you were there. And I was like, I was 5.
In your own world, not worrying
Yeah,
about all
I was
this
just
stuff.
watching TV at the time. So,
Oh my
um,
goodness.
but yeah, so the things that they went through to get me here and get me to a place where I was safe enough to um, go to school and experience a normal life that a child should
Yeah.
was phenomenal. And I bring up the education aspect because in Iran, people of the Baha'i faith, like myself, they're not allowed to do anything in higher education. You're not allowed to go to college. You're not allowed to do this, that, and the third. Your options for life are very limited. So I'm continually grateful that my parents decided to take this huge risk, bring me here,
Yeah.
and not only allow me to have these options, but they also kind of like allowed themselves to have a plethora of options. So that was just very um amazing to me, like Nobel Peace Prize to them,
Yeah.
honestly.
Seriously. You mentioned your faith
Hmm.
and like in terms of culture in the States, Christianity has a very huge influence. And then you also just have just Western culture in general, just sort of, existing here and the different ways that that shows up in comparison to other countries around the world. What has that been like for you and your family to
Hmm.
navigate these new cultures while still like preserving the elements of your religious culture, and like
Hmm.
how does that how does it all fit, you know?
um that's a really good question because the one of the main teachings of my faith is the oneness and unity of humankind.
Mm,
So I was raised on that, like, teaching of diversity, unity and diversity kind of like mindset. I was kind of raised on that. So it really wasn't like that much of like a harsh, you know, thing, because when you're kind of like raised from childhood and like accepting different people, different cultures, different walks of life, the
yeah.
equality of genders, the equality of the races, it's kind of like, okay, now we're
Yeah.
in America and it's all here. So it really wasn't that. In fact, it was more, it made me appreciate my faith even more in
Mm,
that way, because I had that kind of like thing in the back of my head that was like, these are all these people are made of the same dust as you. So it
yeah.
kind of, I think that was another thing that drew me into the Center for Student Diversity, because I was like, wow, like, okay, I'm down with this. So that was
Yeah.
a huge factor.
So you're working in this area full time now, and not too long ago you were a student.
Yes.
What has that transition period been like? Because now, like, you got like a full-time job, you know what I mean? Like
I
you're
know.
you are like an adult, as people kind of say. Like, does it feel different? Were there some struggles sort of pivoting away from, like some of the guardrails that can
Hmm.
sort of exist sometimes?
Hmm. Yeah. So I was very, when I was applying to this job, I was very much like, okay, this is gonna be a big girl job.
Yeah.
Like, but I already prepared myself for that, because I was like, okay, after college, obviously I still have a lot of education that I need to pursue, and there's grad school and this and that. But I was like, I need to take a little bit of time just to figure out what I want to do, especially if
Mm,
I got my degree in psychology, minoring in theater. Um, I was like, there's so many avenues that I can pursue.
yeah.
So I just need a second to take it all in and
Mm-hmm.
weigh my options. When I was applying for this job, I saw the responsibilities of the position, and I knew just how much there was to do and how much there is still that needs to be done. And I took kind of the whole, because I recently got this job in like August, so the
Yeah.
full-time position I got in this August that just passed. I really took the whole summer to really reflect on that and mentally prepare myself. um, and I think when I stepped into the position, the space was so welcoming, and the faces familiar and comforting, that I was like, oh, okay, this is how, we're going to roll with it.
Mm,
And that's kind of been how I've been proceeding with this. Just like, I'm going to roll with it. Like, it's fine. It's going to be
yeah.
okay at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Man, and it can be kind of tough there, but I appreciate you sort of sharing that, like, it's kind of okay post college to give yourself some time to kind of figure
Yeah.
that out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I know I had that stress because like I would see some of my other friends
Mm-hmm.
get like the dream job like immediately. And then
Yeah.
here I was like, I don't even know, like, did I even pick the right major? But like, I'm like 3.5 years in. So like, I just gotta like see it through. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Might as well finish
you
it
know,
up.
this is what I'm saying. Like, it's tough. So like, I, I think that's something a lot of college students have to remember. Um, you still got a lot of life to live after those 4 years, and it can feel like this penultimate moment, your senior year, but like you there's so much time left, and I think people sort of will see it as a failure if they don't hit the success benchmark that they've set for themselves like immediately after, you know.
Yes, I understand that completely, but you know, my reasoning was, if I'm going to be, going to school and, paying for school, and continue this education, I might as well do it in something that I like, right?
Yeah.
So, um, I mean, here we are. So
Yeah.
right now I'm doing something that I enjoy, and it's kind of giving me a vision, slowly piecing together a vision of what I would maybe want to do in the future. Now that vision isn't fully formed yet, but it's giving me ideas here and there. But yeah, there's definitely like a pressure after you graduate from college. Everyone is asking, okay, so what's next?
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, I don't know. I just finished my final. Give me a
I
second.
just got here.
Also, that like it didn't feel like I was in college at all, because the pandemic made everything online for like
Oh
one and a
my
half years, and
goodness.
I'd already transferred over. So prior to that, I had
uh
done a number of courses, so I had a good amount of credits that I had been doing like online.
yeah.
So when I got here, it was like, oh, it's almost time to
Mm-hmm.
graduate. So I really savored the little bit of time that I did have
Yeah.
as a student, kind of. But I still feel like a student, and I think people still mistake me as a student. So it's kind of, I'm still living the experience right now.
I got hit with that a couple of times my first year. That's why I had to
Mhm.
start like wearing my name tag. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I feel like right now I still can like hold that as a compliment because that means like people still like think that I look young. But like when that
Definitely.
starts to wear off, now I'm like, oh, I don't know. Is age catching up with me now? Like, oh my goodness.
No.
I know. And you also mentioned that you had a minor
Yes.
in theater.
Yes. So I got my minor in theater arts.
Yeah.
So I was also very involved in like the theatrical aspect of what was going on campus. Um, I was in a couple shows. I assistant directed a show. I was assistant stage manager for
Oh, wow.
a student run organization. That was something. But it kind of like those, like the kind of logistical side of those things
Yeah.
also equipped me with tools to um, that I brought over to this
Hmm.
position that I'm working right now. Because when you're working as assistant director, assistant stage manager, you kind of you have to turn on that side of your brain. People always
Mm.
think like, oh, theater, it's the creative. I love the creative, but I wanted to step into the more logistic side. And it's for some people, it's not for some people, but I wanted to strengthen both those wings. So I guess it worked out for me.
It's cool. It's cool. So you've got the media sort of love in
Kind
some
of.
ways.
Yeah.
You when we last spoke, you mentioned that like you love like podcasts as well.
No, I if you ever see me walking with my AirPods, I'm listening to podcasts. I always like to have some background noise going. So yes,
Yeah.
I'm constantly listening to something. My I don't know. I think in my 20s I just completely became like a podcast person. Like I used to be always music, but then I was like, "Oh my God, it's like I'm
There's a
having a
shift.
conversation with someone."
Yeah. What are your favorites right now?
Oh, should I pull up my Spotify? Let's look.
There we
I
go.
I kind
Oh,
of
you're
like
you're 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 for real with this one.
no, I'm not like don't hype me up too much because people are gonna be like, "That's what you listen to." So I listen to like a lot of like pop culture. I've been
Yeah,
listening
yeah.
to some I really love history. So like I've been
Mm,
starting to listen to some history stuff.
yeah.
I don't have that on my phone though. But this morning I was listening to the to The Bald and the Beautiful, which is it's Trixie Mattel and Katya. They're two drag queens and they're
Okay.
hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was listening to that. So shout out to them. If they ever hear this podcast, I love you guys.
I know, right? Like we'll find some way to get that to them. Oh man, that's good. I feel like I'm in a completely different ballpark. I'm a
With
bit of
your
a nerd.
podcast.
Yeah. So I this is where I can probably say like I'm becoming an old man because now I'm listening to like political discourse. I'm
Oh.
listening to like the New York Times, but occasionally something that I recently discovered on Spotify that I actually thought was pretty cool. So I also am like really huge into comic books,
Hmm.
and they started doing like audio stories of
Oh wow.
superheroes.
Do you
Yeah.
have to pay for those?
No. So they
Oh.
do, I think Spotify has this thing where when you reach a certain amount of like subscribers or followers and,
Hmm.
and views, you can like put ads in the audio itself. And
Oh
so like it's like a
wow.
commercial basically.
Cool.
Yeah. And I'm listening to this, I'm like, this is a full-on Batman story. And like
That's
it's just
so
straight audio. Yeah. So
I
going
might
in
just
that
check that
direction,
out.
it's actually very cool. Very, 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 very cool. Um, but yeah, I love that we both are the podcast nerds in the suite. I feel like
Yeah.
people gotta understand how beautiful it is to listen to that.
I just enjoy like listening to conversations. Like my ears always perk up when I hear something. So um and yes, I feel like I don't know, but I like to listen to like my news and like my daily like political updates, but I feel like sometimes it gets so serious and
It's
like
a lot.
a lot that I like to sprinkle a little bit of let's keep it
Yeah.
chill, like a bit of like
Honestly, yeah.
yeah.
That's real because I feel like I try to stay up to date as much as I can.
Mhm.
Obviously, due to the nature of my job, I kind of want to know the areas that are affecting it. But then I go through these long periods of time where I can't listen to anything because I'm just like, this is too much. Like I
Yeah.
feel like I'm always on like one side of
Hmm.
the spectrum and I can't like find like a healthy balance.
No, yeah, I understand. It's maybe it'll help if you sprinkle a little bit of
I
comedy
need that.
or
I know.
something in there because that'll help out a lot. But yeah, I've been really getting into like historical podcasts. History was one of the classes back in my younger age when I was like in grade school. That was like one of the classes that I would always like pay attention to and like
Oh, yeah,
actually
yeah.
try in. So I love listening to like things that happened in the past and like tidbits and fun facts and things
Mm,
like that. So I've been really getting into a more, I guess, not serious, but kind of serious, but um,
yeah. Well,
podcasting style.
As we sort of land the plane here, one of the questions that we love to ask the people we interview, and you can sort of share as much or as little as you'd like, when it comes to sort of the work that you're sort of involved in and the suite that you're involved in, the department that you're sort of working in, what would you say is your why? Like, this is why I like working here. This is why I like the diversity and inclusion sort of sector.
Mm-hmm.
What is your why?
What's my why? I think I have a lot of whys. Um, why? Because I believe that students and not just students, everyone in general should have a place where they feel safe enough to express themselves and their identity and celebrate themselves.
Mm,
Um, I've another why maybe because I feel that our space or the inclusion space in general is a place where people can create those they can foster those relationships. And when you foster these relationships with people of different backgrounds and different races and different walks of life and different religions and et cetera, that's
mm,
when those biases start to like tumble down, and they tumble down
mm,
pretty like not they tumble down pretty quickly. um so I think the more that we include different voices and different thoughts, the less of otherness there will be,
yeah.
and faster progression. Honestly, I think that this is one of the most important ways to progress in the world that we are in, the country that we are in, um, is to keep those doors open and keep your mind open
Yeah.
to these different ideas, identities. So these are just like a few of my whys. I think there's a lot of whys. Like we can talk about it the whole day. But it's it's
Yeah.
good. It's a good place to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ava, thank you so much for your time. For the people that do not know where the CSD is, where can they find you and your colleagues?
Ooh, we are on the third floor of the University Union. We are in room 343. Come and visit us. We would love
Yes,
to have you. You can just come and hang out. Like we have spaces for
absolutely.
people to just come and chill out
Hmm.
whenever they want to take a break.
Yeah.
So you can come, bring your friends, um, and come to our events. We have a lot of fun stuff coming up this
Yes.
semester and next semester.
Yes.
So I'm very excited.
Well, Ava, thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
And thank you all so much for tuning in. If this is
Thank
your
you for
first time.
having me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we got to make sure we get in our people. And for the people that are tuning in for the first time, thank you all so much. We'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe on our YouTube and on our Spotify. But with that, again, my name is Adrian Battle Marston, and we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.